Welcome to Citizen Diplomacy International. My name is Paul Lachelier. I'm the founder and the director of Learning Life. It's a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit that runs CDI, Citizen Diplomacy International, and I chair these quarterly CDI meetings. As I put in the Zoom chat, you should please, if you haven't already done so, introduce yourself with your name, your city, your country, email and LinkedIn. If you don't want to share that publicly, but you're willing to share that privately, you can private message Cheller, one of our interns, who is on screen. For Art Records, as I indicated, she's taking all, whatever information you're willing to share, including your name, your city, your country, email, and LinkedIn. I'm going to share a little bit of information about CDI for those of you who are unfamiliar with us. Uh, oops, I think that's, yeah. So CDI is a program of Learning Life, and it's arose in part because citizen diplomacy is kind of a burgeoning field. Due to globalization, the internet, rising educational levels, and long-term democratization. Um, so we are devoted to, as an organization, to to developing innovative learning communities in order to widen and deepen participation in democracy and diplomacy. CDI's specific focus is bringing together scholars, students, diplomacy professionals, and citizen diplomacy practitioners every 3 months online through these quarterly meetings to share news, research, and presentations on citizen diplomacy developments, local to global, all with an eye towards trying to encourage more the growth of this citizen diplomacy sector worldwide for a more participatory, equitable, and sustainable world. So you've got a link there for more information. Um, I am also going to share some action items for each of you to take if you haven't already taken them. And that is in the Zoom chat now. First, I encourage you to subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the CDI bulletin. You'll just essentially get notices of these quarterly meetings. And then you'll also get the results of these meetings, so the video, the photos, et cetera, and so forth. Um, there is a Facebook group and there is also a YouTube channel that you can connect with to learn to essentially get information about each of these meetings, and a LinkedIn group. And then lastly, I'm going to share a few other things here for in terms of action items. Um, we encourage you to become a member of our democracy and diplomacy community. It gives you access to all of our programs. To make a donation if you're able and willing to support Learning Life's work, these quarterly meetings, and to share this brief. We have a brief notice way is essentially that you can through your social media share out. So you can literally cut and paste or copy and paste that invitation there under number 5 to your social media network. Okay, so this meeting, as you can see, is being video recorded. The meeting video, photos, agenda, and the Zoom chat, speaker presentations, and the CDI bulletin will all be uploaded to Learning Life's website and to our YouTube channel. Um, and then, given this is citizen diplomacy, your active participation is important. So, while our speakers are presenting, I do encourage you to speak, to write your comments or questions in the Zoom chat. I'm going to take an initial photo here. I may take a photo again because I usually take a photo of everybody in on the conversation. So if you can turn on your cameras if you're willing. Let me share. Hold on a second here. So turn on your cameras and And smile if you would on three. One, two, three, smile. Perfect, guys. Thank you. Okay. And now I'm going to introduce our speakers. So we have three speakers joining us from China, Nigeria, and Ireland. Currently based in Italy, Junlong Wang is going to be speaking first. He is originally from China, moved to the United States at age 16 for high school, then college at the University of Southern California. He now studies international relations at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies in Bologna, Italy. Having grown up between two worlds, he carries a deep-rooted affection for both China and the United States and seeks to serve as a bridge between them through conflict preventive diplomacy and particularly public diplomacy. He's the founder of the Bridge Cultural Exchange Academy, a youth-led initiative that empowers people to develop their global intelligence, or GQ, and become citizen diplomats in their communities through exchange, dialogue, and narrative. Based in Ireland, Niamh Purcell is a 19-year-old international climate justice consultant working in the space of child participation and climate governance for over 4 years now. Formerly a youth climate advisor for Child Rights International Network, she currently works at multiple international and global governance spaces, including the Right to a Healthy Environment campaign at the Council of Europe. She's a close affiliate of the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Climate Change and Human Rights, Elisa Morguera, supporting her mandate to facilitate youth participation through the management of an online Instagram account at Climate Rights for Kids. She also supports Elisa Morguera through consultations with children and the development of child-friendly reports. Um, Based in France, Richard Appe is head of research and training at Humanity Consulting and founder of Edu for Future Initiative. He is an international development and youth policy expert with over 12 years of work and volunteer experience spanning across the thematic areas of human rights and youth rights, peace, security, and development, climate change education, value-based education, and ethics. He consults with private entities, civil society organizations, governments, and intergovernmental agencies. So I'm going to post that information about them to the Zoom chat. But we are going to start with Jun Long, and they'll each be speaking for 10 minutes, and I will keep time. Jun Long.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much, Paul, for the introduction. So do you share the screen or do
You should
I?
you should go ahead and share.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Just 1 second. Um,
Perfect. We can see it
okay.
now.
Okay, sounds good. Um, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Paul. And as Paul said, my name is Jun Long. I'm originally from China, and I went to high school in the United States. And also, I noticed there are lots of learning life, that two or three learning life interns in this group chat. And back in 2023. I was a learning life intern, like summer learning life intern as well. So it's incredible experiences. Learned a lot from that experience, and that also contribute me, to launch my own citizen diplomacy organizations. Yeah. So right now, this is a Bridge Cultural Exchange Academy. We envision ourselves to be a citizen diplomacy empowerment hub for youth. One of the guiding questions. So when all the question we try to tackle at Bridge is like to tackle the us versus them mentality. So when I was in high school, this triggered my aspiration to tackle these challenges. It was like 2020, the world is shutting down to contain COVID-19. And then I'm on my way home to the airport to catch the last flight. In the airport, in the elevator, there's a man like chatting with me. He's very nice, very friendly, right? And then, he was asking me, where are you from? I told him, oh, I'm from China. But after that, he just pulled up his mask and took two steps backwards and then step away from me. And then, he see me as poster child of Chinese virus or COVID-19. And, I was like, just us versus them mentality lies at the forefront of all the polarization challenges we're all now facing. So then we started to organizing events. Then that eventually lead me to organize a student club at the University of Southern California. And then right now we are in the incubator stage to become a non-governmental organization. So one of the central question we are trying to define or trying to help to advance is citizen diplomacy. So this the slide I'm presenting is I'm quoting Dr. Sherry Miller, former co-president of Public Diplomacy Council of America, and also former president of Global Ties US. Mm, she is one of the most helpful advisor for me and advisor and mentor for this organization. According to this definition, we basically see any individual as the citizen diplomats, any individual's activity or events without government funding or directed by the government as a citizen diplomacy events. Um, which this is our definition of citizen diplomacy. And another really important concept for our organization is global intelligence. We believe we need to empower people to develop global intelligence to become better citizen diplomats, to have a productive and effective, dialogue and exchanges. So there are four concepts under global intelligence. So first of all, it's open your eye, then it's open your mind, open your heart, open your hand, open your heart and open your hand. So it's to raise your awareness between different cultures and to facilitate, foster people's curiosity to understand these differences. And then open your heart is like once you understand intellectually, you need to really foster the empathy to search for common grounds among those differences between people from different countries. And then lastly, we are trying to train people to develop a positive sum mindset to innovatively explore partnership and opportunity to work with others across differences. So th those are our three approaches on how to advance citizen diplomacy. So I call this like 3 E's. So we engage through our storytelling section, the Quiet Diplomats of documentary series. I will talk about that later. And then it's empower people to develop their global intelligence, GQ. We believe JQ is as important as intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence. And then we want to elevate the youth or students to launch their own citizen diplomacy initiative in their local communities. So those are our program section. We have I will for this presentation, I will talk about it in terms of program and storytelling. Well, for the program section, we have four type of program. So at first, this virtual exchange summit, this is our signature summit, annual summits. We have been running it every year. So this is Paul and Learning Life was one of the speakers in two of the summits before. So we it's a annual summit, and then it's typically 6 week long to 8 week long immersive online JQ empowerment summits using metaverse or other AI-powered platform to make this as interactive as possible for students to interact with speakers, to participate in team competition, house cup, and then student forum. It's an opportunity for students to have a close discussion with leading experts in the citizen diplomacy, public diplomacy, international relations, social impact fields. Global Intelligence Summits, it's the largest in-person event we organized last year in Los Angeles and Beijing. So we wanted to offer students a way to think globally, but also narrow down what are the challenges that citizen diplomacy can help address in their communities. Lastly, this is our one of our newer program, Youth Dialogue. We organize youth dialogue between youth from among polarized community like U.S., China, Japan, U.S. To facilitate trust building and social reconciliation. This is our storytelling project, which is our newest project we launched in last August. So it's a documentary interview film. So we interview citizen diplomats from all around the world, but because of where we are based. Most of our chapter are based in the US and China. So we have a specialty in US and China citizen diplomacy. So it's around 5 to 15 minutes long for the interview, and then we will cut it down into 4 to 5 short video clips for social media promotion. And then this style is more like a reflective profile interviews style to hear citizen diplomats' personal story on why they are doing this, what it is they are doing professionally, and what are the reflection of this fields. There are four type of like interviewees we are trying to capture the story. As you can see, right, citizen exchange organizer, exchange participants that encompass all type of like people who participated in exchanges or international education, interacting with people from different cultures. Culture leaders that include entrepreneur, celebrities, or opinion leaders around among different communities, and diplomats or retired diplomats, such as Ambassador Kenneth Kun, a huge advocate for U.S.-China exchanges and food diplomacy. So this is our program impact in terms of program, dialogue, summits. For since 2022, we have been providing direct training to 300 fellows who participated in our summits. Then 3,000 participants is among four type of our program. And then according to the survey, that 92% of them are willingly to rejoin any type of program against. And in terms of our communities, right now we have a team of like 30 volunteers span across like different universities. We are mainly a youth university-based organization. So this is the number is a fellow I was talking about. So we view fellow or alumni as like anyone who participated in our online fellowship, online global intelligence summits or exchange summits. This longer program and dialogues. So we are very fortunate to have the help of all of those community partners and academic communities to provide us with the depth and network of citizen diplomacy. This is our advisory board members. So those people have been instrumental in shaping the organization and providing support, network, and guidance for the organization growth from 0 to 1. Really grateful for their leadership and advices. So I just without getting into too much detail, love to talk about those program and its stories later on. But there are three ways we would love to invite you to become a part of our journey. So first one is like become a potential interviewees. This is the Quiet Diplomat interview documentary. It's the newest program we are launching, and we want to create a citizen diplomacy network to highlight the power of human connection in bridging divides and promote understanding among communities. And so if please share your stories. I believe that your story truly matters in this highly polarized society and changing geopolitical environments. Yeah, and I will share the link for the Google form if you want to share your stories, and that would be great. You can fill up the Google form, and then we have like our quarterly use dialogue. And another way is like to become a partner for the organization or advisors or volunteers. I'm always happy to chat more and then learn from your stories. Yeah, I
All right,
think that's
Junlong,
all for the short presentations. Yeah.
thank you. And you may want to interview, it seems like your fellow speakers for this Quiet
Yes, of course.
Diplomats series. I don't know how quiet they are, but certainly they are citizen diplomats. Niev, you are next.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Paul. Just 1 second to share the slides.
Sure. And so Niev, just for those of you that just joined us, is joining us from Ireland.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for that amazing presentation, Junlong. It was so amazing to hear about all your wonderful work. So as Paul mentioned earlier, my name is Niamh Purcell. I'm going to start with a very quick introduction. I'm 19 years old from southeast of Ireland, and I'm a youth participation specialist, particularly in the context of climate governance. I'm also a student of social science in Southeast Technological University here in Ireland. So I'm essentially a student of sociology, which has served to be very useful to my work as an activist. I'm very excited to tell you more about my work as an activist, only a little bit, and to give a deep dive into why child participation in climate governance is so important. So I've been an activist for almost 5 years now, which seems like quite a long time when I think about how I started back when I was 14. And I began working in the international climate governance space about 3 years ago. 2025 was the best year yet. Last year and into this year alone, I've been involved with 7 fantastic organizations and projects, which include the United Nations. I'm currently working very closely with the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Climate Change and Human Rights, Elisa Morgera, on supporting her mandate for youth participation. Under this, we have founded a child-aimed educational project on Instagram called Climate Rights for Kids. Every week, we release different videos surrounding different topics about climate change to help give young people everywhere quality climate education, which of course is so important when it comes into kind of finding solutions to that crisis, because if you don't understand, there's not much you can do. More broadly then, at Elisa's office, I help to give technical report review and advice, and have even written one from scratch. This is particularly in relation to our child-friendly versions, which was an amazing experience for me. I'm also a youth consultant at the Right to a Healthy Environment campaign at the Council of Europe, which is aiming to get the European Union to legally recognise the right to a healthy environment. Obviously very important given the present climate and how things are only set to get worse in the future. So hopefully we do see some progress coming in on that. I've also just finished a 1 year term with the Child Rights International Network, where I was a member of their fantastic youth advisory team on climate justice. Working with CRIN has been one of the best experiences of my life, and they're like a little family to me. And I was even lucky enough to attend COP30 with them, which was also an amazing experience. So I learned a lot. And then more recently, I've begun working with Future Rights, World Youth for Climate Justice, and my work here largely revolves around the new advisory opinions on climate change from different courts around the world, including the ICJ, and using these to strengthen global arguments for the protection of children's rights in future generations. And of course, I've been so lucky to work with an Irish university, which is University College Cork, over the last 2 years. Last year, I became a member of the Adult Advisory Board for their International Youth Climate Justice Project, which has been fabulous. So I just wanted to start by giving a very brief overview of how I got into this work, and then kind of get into the more details of how children are actively, like, prevented from participating in climate governance. So just very, very quickly, as I mentioned earlier, it really began when I was 14, and one of the science teachers in my secondary school was the lead on the Art School Sustainability Network. I was incredibly lucky to begin working with him in the summer of 2021, and since then, I just haven't really stopped. Throughout 2022 and 2023, I was the student manager of national campaigns for the Irish School Sustainability Network, two of which are award-winning. From my work on the ISSN, I was incredibly lucky to be taken onto the team of young advisors for Ireland's first ever Children and Young People's Assembly on biodiversity loss when I was 15. So this is kind of my first real experience with citizen diplomacy and deliberative democracy. This assembly brought together 35 children and young people as young as 7 years old from all across Ireland to make recommendations to the Irish government on how to preserve and enhance Irish biodiversity. In the end, we made 58 recommendations and calls to action to the Irish government, many of which can be found in Ireland's 2024 National Biodiversity Action Plan. If you'd like to know more about my journey as an activist, because obviously I don't want to focus on this too much, please check out my book, Being the Solution, which is available for purchase on Amazon. Now, we're coming kind of more into the nitty-gritty of it. I thought it would be a lot more beneficial to discuss the wider barriers and prejudices that young people everywhere face, which actively prevent them from participating in civic and political life. I think the work of children and young people, of course, is so important in so many different ways. There's a million reasons why they should be included in policy spaces and decision-making processes. Their impact can stretch far and wide, integrating into political spheres, social cohesion, and cultural enrichment. However, the biggest challenge that remains for children to be properly recognised and heard is their continuous exclusion from politics. Even though we're beginning to see change here, it is still nowhere near where it should be. I like to personally make the following 3 points when I'm advocating for the inclusion of children in decision-making processes. These 3 particular points have been kind of co-designed with children that I've worked with, many of which from the Assembly, and they seem to really work. So the first one is obligation, not option. This means that including children isn't something we can do only if and when we want to. Governments and world leaders have a legal responsibility to ensure children are included in decision-making processes in a meaningful way. Under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, or as it's more commonly known, the UNCRC, children and young people have the rights to have their voices heard and to be given due weight, which means that their ideas must be actively implemented, which relates specifically to Articles 12 and 13 of the UNCRC. Not including young people means that this responsibility is being ignored, which means that the law is being broken. Reminding leaders and politicians of their obligation to protect children's rights, including children's participatory rights, is a very strong way to encourage them to include children more. Another point that I tend to make a lot is that children know what children need. Who better to ask about what supports children need in the world that we live in today than children themselves? They know themselves best, after all, and it's very important to make the point that adults don't always know what's best for children, and it's not fair to make decisions concerning their lives without consulting with them first. If we want to achieve a fuller picture of how we can give young people the support that they need, both in the present and in the future, we should be asking them what they need and then implementing what they say in response to those questions. It doesn't make sense to make those decisions for them on a continuous basis, especially when crises such as climate change will continue to affect them into their adult life. And then the third one that so many young people all across the world love to make, the third point, is our future, our voice. And this is a super strong point and message to make about why children deserve to be included. Any political decisions that are made today will not only affect children today, but they will affect children when they grow up and become adults. Seeing as today's decisions will impact on children when they're older, they deserve to be able to shape those decisions into things that will help them not just now, but when they grow. Excluding young people from decision-making is not only a violation of their rights now, but it will also make things so much more difficult for them when they grow up. They have to inherit any policies that we make today, which means that those policies should be reflective of their present and their future. So as we all know, children and young people face extreme challenges to get their voices and needs heard and actively represented in policy. There's quite a few reasons for this, but I think personally the main ones are as follows. The structural systems that we experience, the historical attitudes that we experience, lack of support, lack of knowledge, and myths surrounding child participation. Just going to give a very quick overview of this. So in relation to structural systems, many political systems and democratic systems don't actually have built-in tools and forums to consider and facilitate children. Because of this, children have to fight harder to get their voices heard, and those things aren't already in place within society to include and value them, which is just making the struggle so much harder, despite their legal rights to be consulted with and to be given due weight. Historical attitudes. Up until very recently, adults have considered that children should be seen and not heard. Because children are the youngest members of the family unit and within society, they were often ignored up until the 20th century even. This attitude is reflected in policy making and political structures because those mechanisms aren't in place to include child participation on a long-term basis. There's also a major lack of support. Not only do the structures within politics not exist to include children, there are also not enough adults involved in politics to include child participation as part of their own political mandate and policies. Children not only have to be included, their inclusion has to be safe, and there should be experienced adults there to support them throughout their participation process. Because these experienced adults are not already part of political institutions, this makes including children that much harder. And finally, lack of knowledge. Quite simply put, not a lot of people know that children actually have the right to be included in the first place. But luckily, I've already discussed some legal documents such as the UNCRC that are there to help facilitate child participation in a meaningful and continuous manner, which hopefully can be used to get more children into political spaces. So I just want to look then very quickly at some of the myths that are around child participation. The biggest one that we hear is that children should be seen and not heard. Just this kind of idea that, children, their voices and their ideas don't particularly matter, and for that reason, we shouldn't be including them. And of course, that is absolutely not true. Another big one that we hear all the time is that children don't have to be included in decision making. Again, absolutely not true. There are those legal principles there within the UNCRC and within many citizen rights that would say that any citizen, including those of children, would have to be included in decision making from their needs to be actively represented both now and in the future. So that one is just kind of completely not true. Another one that's kind of a bit more complicated, I think, is the one where people say young people don't care about political issues. This is one that young people hear all the time, and I think it's actually one of the most angering myths out there. Adults are constantly trying to make the point that children are apathetic towards political issues, meaning that they are either unaware of the world around them or they don't care about it. There are thousands of examples that disprove this statement, ranging from local level action to the highest levels of the UN. So, this is kind of one that we also need to be ignoring, but again, it also has so much influence more than we realize. And then the final one is that children are too inexperienced to be able to participate. I personally heard this one a lot, and a lot of children that I work with tell me that they hear this too. The language around this is incredibly dangerous to use. Too inexperienced is both patronizing and disempowering, and it really does have a lasting effect on children and on their self-belief towards the fact that their voice does actually matter. A lot of the time, this statement comes from the point of view that children are not politicians or accredited academics, so they can really only rely on their own perception of the world to make their case. While this is true in a sense, we have to remember that firstly, political conversations today often surround issues concerning children's futures. Today's children will have to live with decisions we make today when they become adults. So that is a massive reason that we need to include them. I'm aware that I'm going a little bit over time, so I'll finish quite quickly. The most impactful thing that I always experience in my own work is the power of young people when they come together and when they're supported, because including children and young people in political decisions and civic spaces, it just gives this whole new perspective that honestly, it's so hard to get from anywhere else. I'd like to just return to the figure that I gave earlier, where children involved in the assembly in Ireland were as young as 7 years old, and they contributed to recommendations that were given to the Irish government, which were then implemented. Our young people, not just in Ireland, but all across the world, are fantastic leaders. We each have a unique perspective and we want to be heard. It's just that not many spaces have been created for young people to be heard. Projects like that assembly or projects that, for example, CRIN or the UN would run are not that common, and that needs to change. More importantly, these spaces need to be safe and inclusive. Young people need to feel like their opinions are actively sought after, and we then need to see those very same opinions being implemented. Listening to our young people can't just be about ticking a box to say that we've done it. It has to be meaningful. I will finish it there. Thank you so much.
Great. Yev, thank you so much. We are on to our final speaker, Richard Appe.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Now we can.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul, for inviting me to speak at this session. And of course, congratulations to the first two speakers, Niam and Jun Long. I mean, listening to you, I see like a common trend in terms of young people stepping into roles that most times traditional institutions sometimes ignore or recognize less. And I think this is something great. And seeing that in play, youth citizen diplomacy in play in real life, I think it's something that must be commended. Of course, this session is happening at a time that a very important moment in history, a moment that we are faced with a lot of situations in the world today, from conflict, ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Russia, the recently outbreak of war between the US, Israel, and Iran. and the ripple effect in many parts of the world. So this meeting couldn't have happened in a better moment than this time to talk about the youth citizen diplomacy, because of course we are in a moment where we are seeing all the international orders, rule-based orders, the former diplomatic ways are failing and are not able to meet the hope of a better and a peaceful society. But then we also see young people who are acting like Jun Young here and Niam, who are acting in different ways, bringing their voices, ensuring that we continue to talk about the issue-based realities of our society. So it's a great moment to have this conversation, and I'm happy to be part of it. Just to tell you a little bit, maybe about myself, as Paul already introduced, I'm currently head of research and training at Humanity Consulting. And I'm also I'm also a founder of the Edu for Future initiative. So, as part of that, I currently now serve in the North-South Center pool of experts on youth cooperation. And part of my journey into youth diplomacy is the fact that I've been supporting young people to act across border to build a more just and peaceful society. In terms of what I think of youth diplomacy, I would say these are young people that do not wait for mandate to act across borders, but that are crossing ethnic, religious, national lines and all the cultural barriers to build trust across borders, to shape decisions and keep the conversation alive. And to keep cooperation alive beyond formal events, because this is what we see, that even if we create this relationship during formal event, we are able to sustain it beyond those formal events and continue the conversation. For me, how did I start? I started in my the youth movement, the Young Catholic Student in Nigeria, which is a movement that's driven by the methodology of See Church Act, which means we see the reality of our society, we analyze it within the methodology and the faith that we have, and we decide to take actions. These actions are something that we review on a regular basis, looking at the impact that it makes. How can we improve to make it better? And our idea is to continue to build a more just and peaceful society. Therefore, there's always action, reflection, action. So it's a way of going back and forth to review what we're doing and how we can do better to make our society a better place. This led me to realize the reality of my society, and one of them was that at this moment where Nigeria was being destabilized by many realities of conflict, some of them political, but that are tend religious. And so society has created a notion that these religions cannot coexist, whereas our own reality growing up is knowing that even in some family you have people of different religion who live together and who are born in the same family. So the idea that they could begin to kill each other in one day, it's something that we could not fathom. And of course, the political class were exploiting this for their own political gain, to canvass for vote and to instigate other people. And we thought that we could do something. And of course, coming from these different religions, and sometimes very difficult to agree on dogmatic positions or have a conversation where we sit together in a room, except during conflict or in a moment where we are fighting each other. We said, how do we bring this conversation to young people to begin to talk about issues that concern us? And that's how the idea of Dialogue of Life came. And Dialogue of Life, which means bringing religious people from different backgrounds, not to talk about their own dogmatic, strong position of faith, but to reflect on the reality of their society. And this reality can be the reality of climate change, conflict, poor education, hunger in the society, all the different issues that we are facing in our society. And how do we bring young people to take action in a way that improve this situation? And so we begin to put people together to have this kind of dialogue from schools and communities to begin to have conversation around these different issues. Of course, that continued for a number of years. I did serve later on as coordinator of the Youth Caucus for the Nigeria Interreligious Council, which is a council that brings different entities together to talk about interfaith and intercultural dialogue within the Nigerian community. And then that brings me, of course, into the different international platform where I did work as Secretary General for International Young Catholic Students, and later to the ICMIO and UNMGCY, which are all youth platforms that are interfacing within the different United Nations agencies. And of course, in a more professional role, I did play a lot of consulting or assignment with or job assignment within the UN or the European Union spaces. Um, why do we think that youth diplomacy matter? For me, this is very important. Niamh and Yun Long has talked a lot about them, and we can infer from their speeches the importance of youth citizen diplomacy. But I just wanted to highlight a few that I think is important to pay attention to. As young people, we bring that live experiences closer to the issues because as young people, they live the firsthand how global challenges are affecting them in their daily life and how they can grant cross border cooperation in reality. You also build long-term trust and relationship that can outlast political circles and crises between countries because we see even if certain countries are having relationship with others, we see that with the change of government, as we would infer, for example, in the example of the US, traditional allies who are becoming now supposedly enemies or people that they have to converse differently with. The change of government usually changes the approach that countries relate with each other. But this does not happen when young people are interacting with each other across border. This relationship are things that outlast those political circles. They also introduce new narrative, new ideas that challenge the stereotypes and broaden how societies see each other. As Niamh was saying, how the importance of including young people in the past, we haven't seen this conversation when we talk of leadership, when we talk of decision making, and the role that young people or children can play. Today, it's become an issue that we know that youth people, children have agency, they have capacity, and including them, it's a great way of helping them to navigate the circle. We can also help us to expand the table. In the past, we used to say, or I think we still say that if they don't give us a seat at the table, we need to bring our own seat to the table. You know, and expanding the conversation within the international cooperation and ensuring that no one is left behind. So this is an important element. And of course, creating the pipeline of leaders who have already practiced diplomacy and listening in negotiating and collaborating across borders. So these are important elements. Why youth diplomacy? It should be maintained. Of course, there are some challenges, and Niam also already spoke about some of them. I just wish to highlight a few. The major one I would think is tokenism. So young people being invited, for example, to speak at event or to participate event when the decision are already crafted. So it's only symbolic, just a question of just say we had young people there. And then there's also working with different partners, funding agencies, you have situations where the M&E data are focused on quantitative outcome, like how many this for that and that. And so the not intangible elements such as trust building, mindset shift are not things that we can quantify or include in setting M&E. So it becomes very difficult to see the impact of the work that young people do. There's also the funding costs and the strategic shift. You know, a lot of programs, a lot of youth organizations did close down in recent years because of the cut of the funding from USAID and other international agencies. And this is a reality that will continue to happen. That, of course, we cannot keep, if we keep depending on this traditional institutional funding, which is still important, we will continue to add. But once they go off, we lose the capacity to add. And I think it's something that is withering the young people's space and something that we need to begin to think of other innovative way where we can sustain action beyond institutional funding. There's, of course, power imbalance and limited recognition for youth as credible actors in diplomacy. Are there rewards? Yes, even if there are challenges, there are also some progress that have been made. I've enumerated a number of frameworks. I know I'm going above time, but I'll just finish shortly. A number of frameworks that shows that there've been progress that have been made over the years. For example, the UN Security Council Resolution 2250, which I'm sure some of you will be aware or know about, which is the first UN Security Council resolution on the role of young people as credible actors in peace and security. There's also the Youth 2030, which is the UN system-wide youth strategy that was developed in 2018 to help all the UN agencies on how to engage with young people and for young people. There's also, as an outcome of that, the youth co-chair that was created for the UN Interagency Network on Youth Development, because part of the advocacy work was you cannot be discussing youth without youth. And so it's better to have them also at the table, having equal opportunity, equal decision-making capacity, because no one is more expert on youth than the youth themselves. And I think we have seen that as a credible progress, because in the past, we saw a lot of experts on youth who were not youth, or experts on young people who were older generation of people. But these days, we are seeing a lot of young people who are taking the issues as hand and who are leading the conversation and bringing their own perspective into the room, ensuring that we are having credible input and capacity from young people themselves. So this is a great progress that have been made. There are a lot more, like the African Europe Youth Lab initiatives that is bringing African European young people together to cooperate across border within the policy space with financial support from the European Union. And I think recently there was a call which has just ended a couple of weeks ago that is funding youth cooperation initiative across the two borders of 50,000 euros for organizations that are co-applying to run youth cooperation initiative across the two continents. I mean, there are a lot of other initiatives like that that are coming up, which shows that there've been some progress, but then of course there's still more that can be done to harness the power and the capacity of young people to contribute to citizen diplomacy. But for me, the real progress here will be seeing young people that I've worked with who are now shaping the processes or the different processes. Example, the ones I've enumerated here, but other processes within the diplomatic space or even within the development spaces, and not just as participants, but as partners.
Okay.
So,
Great.
just to conclude the question now, it's like where young people are not just future leaders anymore, but they are present actors and they are shaping how communities and countries relate. But the question would now still remain, how do we recognize, resource, and sustain this work beyond the symbolic participation that we usually have in international events? Thank you.
Great, Richard. Thank you. We are going to transition to discussion. We're a smaller group, so I encourage you guys, if you could turn off your slides, Richard. We're a smaller group, and and so I would love for you guys to each contribute to this discussion. I'm going to certainly be pointing to our interns to ask questions or to comment. But does anybody want to go first? Asking questions or offering comments? If you can electronically raise your hands, that would be really helpful. Diego, I think you want to go first and you're trying to figure out how to raise your hand electronically. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you. First of all, I want to commend you for, having chosen this event with these young people. I mean, it's just amazing. There's so much that I could speak about because I worked for the U.S. government in Bolivia, 25 years, leading the most important academic exchange programs. Fulbright was our flagship, our most important program. But then we did many other things, and I have to tell you, 20 years, basically most of those years, leading these programs against the Bolivian government, a government that was completely against the U.S., expelled the ambassador and everything. And then what we decided to do is, and if, forgive me, Paul, but I'm going to change. We spoke about people-to-people diplomacy, but I'm going to call it citizen diplomacy because in the end, it's the same thing. What we did here was, okay, let's do people to people diplomacy, which is, citizen diplomacy. And now that after 25 years, I retired last year. After 25 years of working for the U.S. Embassy and doing such incredibly successful programs, I have to tell you that all of our programs were successful, incredibly successful, not just for Bolivia, but for the region and beyond, had to do with youths. Because we most of our programs were focused on youths and the way they responded, even though we had this horrible environment of like enmity of the government. But the Bolivian youths, and youths, not we're not talking youths from the elites, we're talking youths from the underserved sectors of society. It was just unbelievable. I could really talk about specific things, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say that uh, that the true engines of change was based on what youths, on Bolivian youths, did. And specifically, when I talk about youths, I talk about a city in Bolivia. It's called El Alto, which is like today is a little bit different, but it was like the poorest city, a city of indigenous migrants, basically, that they built this city. But my Lord, the people we got from there, what they were able to do with our programs, and they were sent to the U.S. Some of them stayed here, different programs, but was really amazing. And to this day, when I hear you three speaking, I think that it's real. We need to humanize politics, and we need to reach out and listen to what youths are doing. And
Mm,
I think it's key. And in that way, that's why I want to thank you, Paul, for doing this.
sure.
I think that we
Yeah,
can
and I'm
continue to.
I'm gonna tease out a couple things that you guys are the speakers and others are welcome to comment on. But from what Diego said, it sounds like it's energy and openness are two key things that young people bring to these international conversations. And so the energy clearly is oftentimes there, but also openness that may not exist in older populations that have more, deep set prejudices that have developed over time and reservations and so on. So that's really interesting. Comments from our speakers on that?
Yeah, I would just really like to hop on very quickly on that. Thank you, Diego, for bringing this point and for contributing to it more. I think that what you said is completely true. The idea of people to people, and I think this is where young people have a stronger power because they go beyond those institutional barriers or cultural barriers that may exist in the formal spaces. And I give one vivid example. I have a friend currently that I visited once, and one of his roommate who is Ukrainian, his best friend is Russian, and they are meeting all the time. In recent time, we've met in Paris, had some cultural activities together, went to visit some museum, and had some lunch. And I'm like, this is in the midst of all the ongoing war between these two countries, and these two people from these two opposing countries are having this kind of relationship or friendship together. If they become leaders of their respective countries in the coming years, that means that there's no way that they will be fighting each other because they bring this human connection that they build over time. I think it's an element that we don't usually highlight when we talk about diplomacy, citizen diplomacy, which is something great. And of course, the energy that we bring when we are passionate about something, when young people are passionate about something, they could push it to any level and they don't mind about the formal processes, the whether it's right or wrong. They know that they want to do something good, and so they put all their energy to do it, irrespective of what any other person may think. And so I think empowering them to continue in this way would be beneficial for all of us as a society. Yeah.
Mm. Niev or Junlong?
Yeah, Yeah, thank you so much for Diego for your comments, and I think Richard's example is very, important. It just like it is exactly what citizen diplomacy is about, and also we have a similar example like this. Recently, right? I interviewed peace activist in Japan, and talk about because she is involved in Japanese Communist Party in Japan, and also, but most importantly, is that the peace activism community in Japan, and to talk about de-escalating the narrative between China, Japan, Taiwan. So because and then we will feature her story, her peace building story in our Quiet Diplomats interview series, and then promote it in China. Because right now in China, the narrative against Japan, the public sentiment against Japan, it's incredibly high. It's like, unfortunately, the defamation and then defamation against Japanese community, and also the othering of Japanese people is just reached its new time high after a Japanese prime minister made a comment on Taiwan, and vice versa, right? It's a similar situation is happening in Japan as well. And then I was like, if we can reach to people, um, go beyond the politics, go beyond the news headlines, then probably we can have a much more productive conversation and exchanges.
It's interesting. One of the things that the example that Richard gave, I'm assuming of these two friends, they live in the same place. They're both in Europe, right? There is a certain geographic challenge here, in that, if you happen to be lucky to live in Europe, it's much more easy, not only because of geography, but now because of institutional developments. There's the European Union and all kinds of ways for people from Europe to interact with each other. But, to go to the example Junlong just gave, China and Japan are pretty far apart, and so it's not easy necessarily for people there to interact with each other. Same thing with Russians in the United States, and so all these countries, or the Iranians in the United States. So it's not necessarily easy to create these bridges, but it would seem, I guess, the answer to that is online interaction and building relationships, like the work that Junlong does with the Bridge Cultural Exchange Academy. But I'm wondering if you guys have anything to add to this kind of geographic challenge, right? The fact that in a lot of countries, they may not have the ability to, young people may not have the ability to easily connect face to face. So online is the solution, but even that presents a problem because there are some places where connection is tenuous at best, and sometimes they may not even have cell phones and so on, or let alone laptops. So I'm wondering if you guys have answers to those challenges for young people. And anybody's welcome to chime in. By the way, I don't we have a couple of people here I just want to recognize. Nick Call is joining us from the University of Southern California. He's a professor of public diplomacy. We'd love to get you to chime in. Chris McShane is joining us from the State Department. And Neringa, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I believe you and I just connected on LinkedIn, but you are a PhD student at in the United Kingdom, if I'm recalling correctly, and you actually, I think, work with Richard. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So
Right.
yeah, it would be
Yeah,
great to
correct.
have you guys chime in as well here, because you've got your own deep experiences. Thoughts, if you can share on this kind of geographic challenge and then the internet connection challenge.
Yeah, while others are still waiting to chip in, maybe I'll just quickly chip in. Yeah, indeed, what the challenge you mentioned is real. And of course, I mean, not everyone would have the opportunity of place and a movement that permits them to be in the same space where it's easy to interact and to cooperate with other people from an supposedly opposing side. But then, as you said, online can be a solution. Of course, there are challenges that come with it, but what we can think of in terms of statistical number, that if out of three, four examples, only one can work, we are already making a progress. At the moment, even if because even the online, there are in some countries that you don't have access to internet, or even if there are access to internet, they are restricted, so you cannot even build a relationship across the divide, because if you do that, the government might put you under the radar, you know. But then some people are bypassing these barriers and creating the connections even. We cannot shy away from those difficulties. So we continue to create those spaces of dialogue, of interaction, like Long is doing online. And when we have the opportunity of the physical, because in the physical space, it's easier even to connect mind to mind, people to people, than because seeing them as a person gives a different aura and brings a different energy in the room. So, but while we continue to see that those challenges are there, we try what we have for now, hoping that out of the many trials, there are certain percentage that can lead to success, that can build cooperation between people across borders, and hopefully with those little successes that we gain, we can amplify the actions across borders.
Mm. Others who have not spoken yet? Nev, we'd love to hear from you, but Neringa?
Maybe I will add, and also thank everyone for presentations and a great discussion. Maybe one thing I noticed is that it's getting increasingly more challenging to have safe conversation across camps. So it's quite easy to kind of be in our own bubble, but because people are not protected, it's very challenging to have diverse voices. So for example, I was at a quite high level conference, and there was a Russian activist who was against war, but the person had to travel, kind of hide from his state to avoid persecution. Nowadays, you don't have to be a Russian activist to fear it. You can be based in US and be very conscious that like you might lose your visa, etc. So I think as one of the important areas of advocacy is ensuring that youth activists, human rights activists are protected, and the governments don't have this sort of race to the bottom in protecting themselves from criticism.
Mm. Mm. Nick, any thoughts on this? Would love to hear from
Well, my thought, and it might be a cliche, is that we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and just doing something in this space is important, and having the courage to start something, I think is important, and that's to me the lesson of what John Long has done, is just to actually make a start.
Yep.
So that's my comment. And please, all of you, make a start. And it's impressive to see what small things, what a difference small things can make.
Yep. And Niev, do you want to
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pick up on that point there, I think that's so true. Like having the courage to start, because obviously in the world that we're living in today, it's so difficult to feel like we're doing anything right. There's so many different issues. But I think Diego mentioned two very important things earlier, which is firstly humanizing politics, and secondly openness. Because obviously I'm working in the climate space, so I can really only speak to that. But I find that so much of it is made such a technical issue, and the solutions are seen as technical. And we're often forgetting like that people are losing their lives to this crisis in particular. But that's such a massive aspect of it. So how can we claim to be implementing fair or even representative solutions when we're ignoring such a massive part of it? So, definitely adding in this element of that we're not machines and we're not robots, we're human beings with feelings and emotions. I think that's firstly like the biggest step that we need to take to actually solving any crisis, not just the climate crisis, but to actually recognizing that human beings are vulnerable, and that that has to come first, us looking after each other. But the second thing then that Diego mentioned that really resonated with me was this word openness. Because I know it was said in the context of children and young people being open in the way that they think and in the solutions that they give. I think adults also need to adopt this approach as well, because I think we have a very closed-minded approach to including children and young people. And both my colleagues, Yunlong and Richard, have mentioned the word tokenism. It's such a massive issue. I'm currently planning a conference on youth watching with my colleagues in University College Cork. And this is such a big issue that we're facing when we're implementing children and young people, because like Richard mentioned, it's often after the fact when that decision has been made and when the system has already been developed, like this is what we're going to do. But to say that we've consulted with young people, we'll bring them in at the very last minute. That's not a fair way of doing things. And I think, you know, if adults could just open themselves to the possibility of actually including children and young people from the start, like was done in the assembly that I was involved in, because I must really press the point that it worked so well and it's been recognized in so many states across the world, that our assembly was so successful because we had a design team with children and young people right from the get-go. It does work. So adults also need to change their own perspectives and to be open to the fact that, you know, politicians often think in 4-year terms, to be blunt. The children and young people are thinking about their future far, far beyond those 4-year terms. So that's why we need to be bringing them into these conversations. They know how to shape what they need and how to get their own needs represented. But if we're not asking them, can we really say that what we're doing is fair? So those are just my thoughts. Very heavy duty stuff.
That's great, Niev. I'm wondering if there's we can make a distinction between tokenism and trivialization here, because the ways in which some of you are using the term tokenism sounds to me more like trivialization, and tokenism is a somewhat different thing and a different problem, but it's a serious problem, and I want to kind of like develop that based upon a comment I made in the Zoom chat. So I make this distinction between the pick me kids and the non-pick me kid, the don't pick me kids. It's the same thing with adults, quite frankly. It's not just kids. Generally speaking, when it comes to participation in anything, most people don't want to participate in, especially in politics and in policy making circles. They'd rather be private, do things with their family, their friends, and outside of that, they'd rather not participate. And so tokenism to me signals there are basically two different ways of engaging young people. One is to select the few pick-me kids, and who say, yes, I'd love to participate, by all means. And those kids, for better or worse, tend to be, it's the same thing with adults again, tend to be from middle and upper class backgrounds and have outgoing personalities, right? Type A personalities. And there are large numbers of people who are not like that, who are not middle to upper class, don't have the vocabulary, don't have the knowledge, and then don't necessarily have outgoing personalities. And the question is, how do we include those kids, right? And so tokenism here is not trivialization where, oh, the kids are allowed to participate after the fact when things have more or less been said, they're allowed to speak. That's trivialization. Tokenism is in the process of selection. It's in who gets to speak among young people and who doesn't get to speak. And so, Niev, you have actually experienced, as far as I know, you have experience with a very different model of instead of just selecting one or two kids who are, super motivated, very qualified. There are lots of these wonderful kids, and God bless them. We want them to participate. It's a different model, which is based upon kind of group deliberation with random samples. So Niev, can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And I think that's such an important point to bring up. So what Paul is talking about here is again the assembly that I was involved in, where we had a random selection model. We had over 500 applicants from all across Ireland, aged between 7 and 17, that applied to be assembly members, and completely randomly selected. It was regardless of race, age, within that parameter, obviously, ethnicity, background, anything like that. And it honestly worked really well because, the idea and the methodology behind it was that any young person in Ireland, if they walked into that room, would be able to find someone like themselves in terms of their age, in terms of where they come from, in terms of what they know, and in terms of, their background. So that was kind of really, really important to us. And, I think that impact has been shown in the recommendations that the Assembly made, because 58 recommendations were submitted to the Irish government, and I think 52 of them were included in Ireland's National Biodiversity Action Plan in some shape or form. That is a massive percentage of what we submitted. So I think it just goes to show that when you're not handpicking these pick-me kids, like Paul said, and you're giving those kind of quieter, more reserved children and young people that haven't had the opportunity to participate before, the opportunity to speak out, it's really going to serve to benefit you. But to be honest, like when we're trying to do that, I think something that we really need to consider is class stratification and how our systems are stratified to include the middle and upper class, because that is how it works, unfortunately, in society. But it is the lower classes, unfortunately, the middle lower classes and the lower class that are experiencing the brunt and the worst of all of these social issues that we're talking about, not just climate change, also poverty, gender inequality, gender violence, whatever it may be. It is the lower classes that are experiencing the worst of it. So they're the ones that really need to be included. So the first step that we need to take is addressing the power imbalances that are actually within our systems that enable people to participate in the first place, because for as long as those inequalities can perpetuate, we're not going to be given representative solutions. Sure, it may serve for the higher classes and the middle classes, but for the lower class people who are really, really struggling with the things that we're facing today, it's not going to do anything. So that's the first thing that we absolutely need to address. Class stratification is such a massive issue and it's not spoken about enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. And this is, Nick's point about let's not the good be the perfect be the enemy of the good is taken well, but nonetheless, like, there's a lot of we want to encourage Jun Long, Niev, and Richard and others to be participating, and but we also want to deal with these really systemic, problematic challenges and be perpetually aware of the fact. I say this in part because there are ways, and I say this as a sociologist, there are ways in which kind of participation can actually aggravate inequality, right? If it is middle and upper class people who are participating and working class and poor people are not participating, and as Niev pointed out, those people tend to disproportionately be burdened with all kinds of problems, climate change, poverty, war, et cetera, and so forth, then we're only making things worse, right? And we're only allowing a certain segment to then shuttle up and shuttle meaning advance, et cetera, and so forth. So these are really serious challenges. Chia, I don't know. Chia's joining us from. He's from Cameroon, but is joining us from United Arab Emirates. And I don't know if you had you unmuted. I'm wondering if you had something to say. But I'd also love to hear from those of you, speaking of those who have been quiet, Kathleen, Samiksha, and Jalen, if you guys have questions or comments, and Cheller as well.
Yeah, I can speak. So I think that something that I'm finding interesting about this meeting and this whole idea is, as a college student who is still kind of looking to get involved in this field, just from the professionals here and people who have been doing it for a while, what are some ways you would kind of suggest to start getting into that space, especially like not having previous connections?
To our speakers.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And then I think I was exactly in that situation when I was in fr sophomore year, right? Then I think one of the thing I tried is I had a conversation with my professor, Professor Becker, and then he recommended me to reach out to a person called, I don't know, Dr. Nick Cole. He recommended me to reach out to Professor Cole to say, if you are interested in the citizen diplomacy, you should reach out to Professor Cole and then have a call with him. Then I had a call. I sent Professor Cole an email. Then then we scheduled a call like for 20 minutes. Then he recruited me into his class at USC, and then I recruited him to be the organization advisor. So, and then, through Professor Cole's class, Paul was one of the speaker in Professor Sherry Miller was one of the speaker in Professor Cole's class, and then through Sherry, right? I got to know PDCA. I got to intern with Paul at Learning Life. So I was like, one of the advice I would give to you is like, just reach out to people, right? This is Professor Sherry Miller always talk about. She has a wonderful book, learning working world, the guide for people want to get into international education, learning working world, and I can send the link to you. It's basically how to network, how to build your network, how to participate in these fields, and it's a wonderful book. And then the best advice she gave it to me is like, always follow up, right? When you had a chat with somebody, always follow up. And then she said, the reason why she supported BCEA and all of those like interview project, and the interview project is Professor Sherry Miller's initial brainchild idea. It's like she had talked with so many college students. She was at Professor Cole's class for multiple times. And then, but she said, I'm one of the only few students followed up with her. And then in DC and also at PDCA. So I was like, just always follow up with people could be a very important step when you are trying to get into any industry you want to get in.
Hmm. So do you want to, by all means, Junlong, share in the Zoom chat
Yes.
Working Worlds by Sherry Lee Mueller. It's a good book for people who are trying to get into international affairs careers. I
Just wanted
think,
to add a little
yeah.
thing to Junior Young sharing. I mean, of course, sometimes also for you as young person, it's to begin little. You don't have to think like I have to be already like beginning at the top where I'm already engaging with international organizations, having my diplomatic engagement, seeing what like Junior Young is doing or what Niamh is doing. I want to already be like that as of today. You can begin little in your class, start having conversation of the issue that concerns you, even in your school, in your community. How can we engage? What can we do as young persons? Analyzing those issues. What solution can we do from our own perspective as young person? And that will bring you to begin to think of what network can I create? Who can I contact to have a conversation to share perspective? And step by step, you can get into the space where you can begin to have this kind of conversation across border. But what I just wanted to emphasize is not to despise those little beginnings in your community, in your school, in your college. It will help you go even in a long way. And to finish up, you talked about the trivialism and the question of tokenism earlier, Paul. I think they are both issues that affect the youth citizen diplomacy or youth engagement in general as a case, because you also have the fact that many institutions now recognize the importance of meaningful youth engagement wants to really create a space for them to be there, just to share that we are doing something, we accept that is important and want to show you that we are doing something. So they want young people represented anyway, but the role that they play, you can quantify it as either important or just representative. And we are saying it doesn't have to be representative because you cannot bring them just for consultative purpose, just to be there. And when it comes to implementation, they are second in the line. So they need to really be there from co-creating or co-reflecting on these issues and co-creating the solutions together, and then seeing to it that those solutions are put in place. But what we have is not that. Many institutions are now saying we have to do something, and they are creating out of their head some mechanisms to engage with young people without really bringing them in. And when they come in, they're just there just to tick the box that the young people was here, we're here, and so we have engaged young people. But this is not what youth engagement should really be about. It really have to be meaningful, which means you have to engage from the grassroots to the top, ensuring that their perspective is actually making a difference in the conversation and not a question of number.
Yev, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, very quickly, just to answer that question about how to get involved in these spaces, I think as well, like it's so important not to underestimate the importance of grassroots activism. I genuinely miss my grassroots days because like building from the bottom up is also so important. I read just before COP, it was a quote like, the UN isn't the end goal. Like, being in this massive international space where a lot of work does get done, that shouldn't be the end goal because, it is great, but it's not everything at the same time. So, I think just starting small and building your community and slowly working from that, like, that is just as important as ending up in a high-end international space. So, like Junlong said, don't be afraid to reach out. So many organizations are just so happy to have volunteers that actually want to do this work. So my biggest advice would be just to go for it. Don't be afraid to do it. I held myself back so many times when I was a bit younger, like because I was afraid, thinking that I wasn't experienced enough and that I didn't know enough to be in these spaces. Don't do that because once you care, that's all you need.
Mm. Jalen, you had a question?
I did have a question, but it was kind of answered. My question was kind of like, well, where do you even start? But of course, that Mr. Cole answered that question, like just start somewhere, and then the speakers went to further expound on that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my question, especially in like getting involved in just even in this international organizations in general. Like sometimes it seems like such a broad space, especially like if when involved in activism, and even something as um, specific as youth diplomacy. And so just hearing that also put a lot of things into perspective. And the discussion definitely left me it has me thinking a lot more in terms of like in terms of just, I guess, not even just the power of youth and activism and the youth and just youth diplomacy and maintaining those connections, but more so in even in like the lived experiences of that youth, in those class differences as were mentioned previously, and just kind of how everything is just not one affecting each other, but also how those specific experiences are just very, very important, essentially in catering to this conversation. So
I'm going to put in the Zoom chat, thanks, Jalen, list of organizations that engage youth in international affairs. And if you could, any of you, just send links or write names of organizations. Samiksha actually is involved. She's a leader in the Model United Nations movement. That's an example, just to give some answers to like how do you plug in as a young person to international affairs and kind of develop a career in that. That's a great way to participate. But if you can kind of share any other linkages, ways in which, and particularly kind of international institutions that in fact encourage the participation of young people and have ways for young people to participate, that would be really helpful. Um, so and I want to respect your time. So I'm going to finish off our meeting by sharing with you our bulletin. And speaking of, so this is actually a good segue. Our bulletin is produced quarterly and appears with each of these meetings. So I'm going to briefly share my screen and show you the bulletin. Which has a variety of opportunities you may or may not be aware of. This is the bulletin. You'll be getting it via email if you're part of our list. Straight off, and this is in part thanks to my co-editor who does not want to appear on screen, unfortunately, with me. I wish he did. But he works with the State Department. And this first one is the United Nations Youth Assembly. So this happens actually, apparently, I believe it's quarterly at the United Nations. And so it is happening. The next one is happening on the 15th through the 17th. And so that is one opportunity to participate. There are on the page two a variety of other opportunities to participate for those of you in the United States who are American. There's the U.S. National Youth Ambassador Program. I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe that's Latin American. But it may not be limited to Latin America. The second one is the G20 has its own youth summit. The ASEAN Youth Assembly, so in Asia, has its own youth assembly, and that's happening in August. There's the World Youth Forum that's happening in Egypt. It's organized by the Egyptian government. And then lastly, there's the Commonwealth Youth Forum. Below that, we have some articles. Many of these are about young people and youth diplomacy. So there are ways to connect with a literature on the ways in which young people are involved in citizen diplomacy. And there are a couple of recent books. And lastly, you have, if you want to learn more about Richard, Niev and Junlong, there are profiles of each of them. So I am going to finish off by stopping sharing my screen and just share with you the times for our next CDI meetings. I'm going to put that in the Zoom chat. So we have three more meetings this year. They are Tuesday, June 2nd. That will be on development diplomacy, international development and citizen diplomacy. In September, we're going to be broaching peace diplomacy. And then in December, we're going to have a special meeting on family diplomacy and climate change. So Niev, we actually may be reaching out to you again on that because, well, it'd be great to have you part of that conversation. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your participation. I'm sorry, this group is a relatively small group, but we do have upcoming. We will be sharing this out to a much broader list of about 1,300 people in 110 different countries across the world. So they will get a recording of this meeting. They'll get photos and they'll get some content from the meeting, including the Zoom chat posts. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your day. Bye. Thanks to our speakers.
Thank you. Bye bye.